March 2nd, 1943, Marseille, France. The coded telegram crackles through to a cramped apartment in Toulouse, 400 kilometers away. 3 words that change everything. Pat has fallen. Albert Guéris, the Belgian doctor known as Pat O'Leary, sits in a Gestapo interrogation room, his face already swollen from the first round of questioning. In the basement cells below, 47 more resistance workers await the same fate. The largest escape network in occupied France has just collapsed. Over 600 Allied airmen saved. All of it gone in 72 hours. What the Gestapo doesn't know is that the elderly woman reading that telegram in Toulouse, smoking a cigarette through her long ivory holder with a cat purring at her feet, is about to do something they believe impossible. At this exact moment, 127 Allied airmen are hiding in attics, barns, and cellars across southern France. Without the O'Leary line, they're stranded behind enemy lines. The Nazis are closing in. Every hour that passes, the noose tightens. Here's what was at stake. Training a single B-17 bomber crew cost $204,370, 3 months, and $15,000 per man in 1943 dollars. When a bomber went down over France, the Allies didn't just lose a $238,320 aircraft. They lost 10 men who represented over $150,000 in training investment and 3 years of irreplaceable combat experience. In 1943, the death rate for Allied bomber crews exceeded 44%. Less than 1 in 4 crews completed their 25-mission tour. The strategic bombing campaign was bleeding the Allies dry. The woman in Toulouse knows these numbers intimately. She also knows that by sunrise, the Gestapo will have every address, every safe house, every name from Pat O'Leary's broken body. She has perhaps 48 hours before they come for her. Marie-Louise Dissard is 61 years old. She runs a small dress shop. She has no military training, no weapons, no security team. The French police consider her mentally unbalanced. In her handbag, fake identity cards, 50,000 francs in British intelligence money, and the addresses of 18 men wanted by every German soldier in France. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that this seamstress smoking nervously in her apartment would personally save more Allied lives than most infantry battalions, pioneer a network that would rescue over 700 airmen, and help establish the template for the 7,000 total aircrew who would escape occupied Europe. But first, she had to do something certifiably insane. Let's rewind 6 months to understand the crisis facing the Allies in late 1942. The strategic bombing campaign over Nazi-occupied Europe is hemorrhaging trained personnel. Every week, dozens of American and British bombers fall from the sky over France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The crews parachute into hostile territory wearing flight suits that scream Allied Airman. They speak no French. They have no idea where to hide. Within hours, most are captured. The statistics are brutal. Of the airmen shot down over occupied France in 1942, fewer than 5% successfully evaded capture. The rest spent the war in Nazi POW camps, or worse. For the aircrews flying missions, it was a death sentence with extra steps. The expert consensus from Allied High Command was clear. We cannot afford to lose these men, but there's nothing we can do once they go down over occupied territory. MI9, the British intelligence unit responsible for escape and evasion, tried everything. They printed silk maps hidden in playing cards. They distributed compasses concealed in uniform buttons. They sent coded messages through BBC broadcasts. None of it worked. Downed airmen still needed something intelligence officers couldn't provide from London. People on the ground willing to risk their lives. Enter the Pat O'Leary line. Named after Guéris's alias, this network stretched from Brussels to the Spanish border, over 1,000 kilometers of occupied territory. Safe houses, guides, forgers, train conductors, farmers. At its height, the O'Leary Line was moving 30 to 40 Allied evaders per month through a sophisticated underground railroad. But there was a fatal flaw that British intelligence recognized but couldn't solve. The entire network depended on one man. If Pat O'Leary fell, everything collapsed. In London, MI9 officer Harry Neve paced his office, chain-smoking. "We're building our entire southern escape route around a single point of failure," he told his colleagues. "It's brilliant, but it's not sustainable." And then, catastrophically, the nightmare scenario happened. Not through German intelligence work, but through betrayal from within. Harold Cole, a British sergeant the MI9 officer James Langley would later call an utter shit who betrayed his country to the highest bidder, sold the entire O'Leary network to the Gestapo for money. In a 48-hour period starting March 2, 1943, the Germans rolled up the entire organization. Guéris, the safe houses, the guides, the train conductors, all arrested. The strategic impact was immediate. Between March and April 1943, the evasion rate for Allied airmen dropped to nearly zero. Dozens of downed pilots and bombardiers sat in French farmhouses with no way out, waiting for a network that no longer existed. Back in London, Neve received the devastating reports. The Pat O'Leary Line had helped over 600 men escape to Britain. Now there was nothing. "We're back to square one," he wrote in his diary. "Every airman going down over France now is going straight to a POW camp." The problem seemed insurmountable. You couldn't run an escape network remotely from London. You needed someone with deep local knowledge, extensive contacts, and the operational security to avoid German infiltration. Someone the Gestapo didn't know about. Someone they would never suspect. In Toulouse, Marie-Louise Dissard read the telegram about Pat's arrest one more time. Then she threw it in the fireplace, picked up her ivory cigarette holder, and grabbed her shopping basket. She had 127 Allied airmen to save, and the Gestapo thought she was just an eccentric old woman who talked too much. Marie-Louise Dissard was everything a spy was not supposed to be. Born November 6, 1881, in Cahors, she was 61 years old in 1943, an age when most women focused on grandchildren, not guerrilla warfare. She had zero military experience, no intelligence training, no combat background. Her only qualifications were running a small dressmaking boutique on Rue de la Paume in Toulouse and working as a secretary for the city government. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, loud, opinionated. She talked constantly, chain-smoked cigarettes through a dramatic ivory holder, and carried a cat named Mifouf everywhere. The French police had a file on her that concluded she was mentally unbalanced, an assessment she encouraged because it made her seem harmless. But what the police file didn't capture was this. Marie-Louise Dissard understood something fundamental about occupied France that military strategists in London didn't. The insight came in July 1942, when a man named Paul Ullman knocked on her door. Ullman worked for the O'Leary Line and was hiding English airmen shot down during bombing raids. "Mademoiselle Desard," he said quietly, "I need your help." She looked at this man, asking her to commit treason against the German occupiers, punishable by torture and execution. Then she looked at her dress shop, her modest apartment, her quiet life. "How many airmen need shelter?" she asked. "Right now? 6. But there will be more." That night, Marie-Louise Dissard made a decision that would save hundreds of lives. Not because she was brave, though she was. Not because she had skills, though she'd proved surprisingly adept. But because she had a realization that eluded both Allied intelligence and the Gestapo. Nobody suspects the elderly woman with a shopping basket. She started small, renting a villa in Toulouse to house evaders, cooking meals for resistance members in prison, building relationships with train conductors, cafe owners, farmers along escape routes. By December 1942, she was running the entire Toulouse section of the O'Leary line, arranging safe houses, forging documents, escorting airmen on trains under the noses of German soldiers. Her code name was Françoise. Her cover was perfect, an eccentric shopkeeper making her daily rounds, gossiping with neighbors, buying black market food, visiting friends. The shopping basket she carried could contain anything: francs for bribing train conductors, fake identity papers, coded messages, clothing for airmen, food rations. She seemed never to sleep, one resistance member recalled. She survived on black coffee and cigarettes. She would appear at 3 a.m. to move an airman, then be at her dress shop by 9 a.m. as if nothing had happened. The moment of full realization came that March night in 1943 when the telegram arrived about Pat O'Leary's arrest. Most people would have fled, gone into hiding, saved themselves. Marie-Louise Dissard did the opposite. She grabbed her shopping basket, put on her most ridiculous hat, and walked straight toward Gestapo headquarters to rent a new safe house in the building next door. The crazy old lady was about to create the most audacious escape network in World War II history. Marie-Louise Dissard's workshop was a cramped apartment at 40 Rue de la Paume, literally in the shadow of Gestapo headquarters in Toulouse. This wasn't bravery. It was calculated genius. "They'll never look for me where they sleep," she explained to her deputy, Jean Bregy. "I'm hiding in plain sight." Her crude prototype was brilliantly simple. She would become what the Germans expected, and then weaponize their own assumptions against them. The system worked like this. Downed airmen would be collected by local farmers and resistance contacts in the countryside. They'd send word through coded messages to Françoise in Toulouse. She would arrange train tickets, provide false documents identifying the airmen as French workers, and personally escort them on the train from northern cities to Toulouse. Picture this: a 61-year-old woman in an absurd feathered hat, chattering loudly in French, fussing with her shopping basket, accompanied by a nephew who speaks no French and is clearly terrified. German soldiers see this scene daily on trains throughout occupied France. An elderly aunt escorting a shy young relative. They wave them through checkpoints without a second glance. The first test came in April 1943, just weeks after Pat O'Leary's arrest. 8 American airmen were hiding in a farmhouse near Bergerac, 120 kilometers from Toulouse. The Gestapo was conducting door-to-door searches. Time was running out. Marie-Louise made 3 train trips in 4 days. Each time, she escorted 2 to 3 nephews past German checkpoints, chattering non-stop about fabric patterns and complaining about food rationing. The Germans were so annoyed by her constant talking, they rushed her through inspections just to make her leave. All 8 airmen reached Toulouse safely. From there, she arranged their passage to Perpignan and across the Pyrenees into Spain. The reaction from other resistance members was immediate and brutal. "That is suicide." "You're going to get everyone killed," a veteran O'Leary operative told her. "You're too visible, too loud, too memorable." "Exactly," she replied, blowing cigarette smoke through her ivory holder. "They remember the annoying old woman with the cat. They don't remember the faces of the men I'm moving." Another resistance leader was more direct. "This is illegal. MI9 has strict protocols. You can't just create your own network without authorization from London." Marie-Louise looked at him coldly. "Then, 127 Allied airmen will die while we wait for permission from bureaucrats who aren't being hunted by the Gestapo." She sent one message to London through Swiss intermediaries. "Pat has fallen. Françoise has risen. Send money." The British vice consul in Switzerland, Victor Farrell, read her message and immediately understood what was happening. An elderly French shopkeeper was about to do what the entire British intelligence establishment said was impossible: rebuild a collapsed escape network from scratch under active Gestapo surveillance with zero military support. Farrell approved emergency funding, 200, 300 US dollars per airman delivered to Spain. The Françoise Line was operational, and the Gestapo still thought she was just a harmless old woman who talked too much. May 1943, a secure facility outside London. Ari Neve, the MI9 officer responsible for escape lines, reads the intelligence report from Switzerland with mounting disbelief. An unauthorized network operating in Toulouse, run by a 61-year-old woman, no military training, moving airmen past Gestapo checkpoints using shopping trips. This is insane, Neve says. She'll be caught within weeks. His colleague Jimmy Langley leans over the report. The Swiss say she's already moved 34 airmen since Pat fell, in 6 weeks. That's impossible. That's what I said. But the airmen are arriving in Gibraltar. They're real. The room erupts in debate. Half the officers argue for shutting down the Françoise Line immediately. She's compromising operational security. She's putting the entire southern network at risk. We need professionals, not amateur seamstresses playing spy games. The other half recognize something the statistics can't deny. The Françoise Line is working. Gentlemen, says a senior officer quietly, let me ask you this. Since Pat O'Leary's arrest in March, how many airmen have been successfully evacuated through southern France by official networks? Silence. And how many has this dressmaker from Toulouse evacuated? More silence. Exactly. We don't have the luxury of perfectionism. We have bomber crews going down every single day. If this woman can get them home, I don't care if she does it wearing a tutu and singing opera. But the confrontation that would determine everything happened not in London, but in Toulouse itself. August 1943. A courier from the Comet Line, another major escape network operating out of Belgium, arrives at Marie-Louise's apartment. He's been sent to assess operational viability of the Françoise Line. The young courier, a trained intelligence operative, reviews her operation with growing horror. Safe houses with minimal security, fake documents produced by amateur forgers, no dead drops, no coded communications, no operational protocols. And this 61-year-old woman personally escorting airmen on trains while chain-smoking and carrying a cat. Mademoiselle Desard, he says carefully, with all respect, this operation is unconventional. You mean dangerous and stupid? I didn't say that. But you're thinking it. She lights another cigarette. Tell me, how many airmen has the Comet Line moved through Toulouse since March? That's not 0. The answer is 0, because you're all waiting for the proper security protocols while my men rot in attics. Your methods will get people killed. My methods are getting people home. The argument escalates. The courier insists she's violating every rule of clandestine operations. She counters that she's violating expectations, which is exactly why it works. He demands she submit to London oversight. She refuses. Finally, he delivers the ultimatum. If you don't submit to proper intelligence protocols, MI9 will cut your funding. Marie-Louise Dissard stares at this young man half her age trying to threaten her. Then she smiles, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Go ahead. Cut my funding. I'll sell my dresses. I'll use my own money. I'll beg on street corners. But those airmen are going home, with or without London's permission. The courier returns to his superiors, expecting them to shut her down. Instead, Ari Neve makes a decision that saves hundreds of lives. He approves full funding for the Françoise Line and gives Marie-Louise complete operational independence. His reasoning is simple and brilliant. Conventional methods failed. Harold Cole infiltrated and destroyed the O'Leary line using conventional tradecraft. This woman is succeeding precisely because she breaks every rule. The Gestapo doesn't know how to hunt someone who doesn't operate like a spy. He adds one more crucial directive. And for God's sake, don't tell her how to do her job. She clearly knows better than we do. The funding flows. The Françoise Line expands. By September 1943, Marie-Louise has a network of over 100 helpers scattered across southern France. Train conductors, farmers, doctors, cafe owners, nuns, even a few sympathetic policemen. She continues her shopping trips, moving airmen past German soldiers who see nothing but an annoying old woman with a basket. The Gestapo has no idea the elderly seamstress living next to their headquarters is running the most effective escape network in occupied France. If you're finding this story incredible, wait until you hear what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. The data from 1943-1944 tells an extraordinary story. Between March 1943 and August 1944, the Françoise Line successfully evacuated over 250 Allied airmen from occupied France to Spain. Combined with her earlier work on the O'Leary Line, Marie-Louise Dissard personally facilitated the rescue of over 700 Allied aircrew. But numbers don't capture what was actually happening on the trains, in the safe houses, across the Pyrenees. Let's follow one mission in detail. March 5, 1944, a P-51 Mustang pilot named Chuck Yeager is shot down over France during a bomber escort mission. He parachutes into a field near the village of Baudère-sur-le-Chat. Within minutes, French farmers hide him in a barn. Within 24 hours, word reaches the Françoise Line, American pilot, injured, needs extraction. Marie-Louise personally handles his case. She arranges safe houses, provides civilian clothes, creates a fake identity. Charles Lemaire, deaf-mute textile worker. The deaf-mute cover is genius. It explains why he can't speak French. On March 8th, Marie-Louise meets Yeager at a farmhouse outside Toulouse. He's 21 years old, terrified, and has no idea why this tiny elderly woman with a cat is his escape route. "Do exactly as I say," she tells him in broken English. "On the train, you are my nephew. You are deaf. You cannot hear. You cannot speak. If German soldiers ask questions, I will answer. You stare at the floor and look stupid. Understand?" Yeager nods. They board the train to Toulouse. The car is packed with German soldiers returning from leave. Marie-Louise sits beside Yeager, chattering loudly about fabric shortages and complaining about rationing. She's so annoying that the German soldiers actively avoid eye contact. At Toulouse, they're stopped at a checkpoint. A Gestapo officer examines papers. Marie-Louise launches into a dramatic monologue about her poor nephew, who lost his hearing in a factory accident. She's so over the top that the Gestapo officer stamps their papers just to make her stop talking. Yeager later wrote, "This little old lady was either the bravest person I ever met or completely insane. Maybe both." From Toulouse, the Françoise Line passed Yeager to mountain guides who led him across the Pyrenees. He reached Spain on March 30th, 1944. By April, he was back in England. By October, he was flying combat missions again. Chuck Yeager would go on to become the first pilot to break the sound barrier. But on March 8th, 1944, his life was in the hands of a 62-year-old French seamstress with a shopping basket. The enemy perspective reveals just how invisible the Françoise Line remained to German intelligence. A Gestapo report from December 1943, recovered after the war, notes, "Continued escapes of Allied airmen through Toulouse sector. Source unknown. Suspect communist network operating from rural areas. Recommend increased surveillance of suspected sympathizers." They were looking in completely the wrong direction. The source was living next door to their headquarters, walking past their offices daily with a basket full of contraband. Another recovered Gestapo memo from March 1944 states, Local informants report elderly women frequently seen escorting young men on trains to Perpignan. Investigation reveals subject is Marie-Louise Dissard, age 62, dressmaker, known to be mentally unstable. Assessment: harmless, no action required. That harmless woman moved 43 Allied airmen passed the German checkpoints during the 3-month period that report covered. The kill ratios, or rather, the life ratios, are staggering when you understand what Marie-Louise's work meant strategically. Each B-17 bomber crew consisted of 10 highly trained specialists: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, radio operator, and 4 gunners. Training costs, $15,000 per man, 3 months minimum. Many crews had completed 20-plus combat missions, representing irreplaceable combat experience. When a bomber went down over France without the escape lines, the crew was lost, killed, or captured. The Allies had to train complete replacement crews from scratch. 10 men, $150,000, 3 months training, 0 combat experience. When a bomber went down with the escape lines operating, here's what happened. 30–40% of the crew survived the shootdown and evaded initial capture. Of those, the Françoise Line and other networks successfully returned approximately 60–70% to Allied control. These men could brief intelligence on German defenses, resume combat operations after a brief rest, and their combat experience was retained. Do the math. For every 10 bombers shot down over Françoise Line territory, Marie-Louise's network potentially saved 20 to 25 trained aircrew who returned to combat operations. That's the equivalent of 2 to 3 complete bomber crews saved from every 10 lost, a force multiplier that Allied commanders desperately needed. American bomber crews knew about the escape lines, though they weren't told details. They called them freedom trails. Before missions over France, squadron commanders would brief, "If you go down, try to reach a village. The locals may help. We have people there." One B-17 pilot, Lieutenant James Holt, shot down in September 1943, left this testimony after the war. "We bailed out over a farming village. I expected to be captured within hours. Instead, a farmer hid us in his barn. 3 days later, an elderly French woman arrived. She must have been 60 or 70 years old. She had false papers, food, and clothing. She personally escorted me and my bombardier on a train past German soldiers. She sat there smoking cigarettes and chattering in French while I sat praying the Germans didn't ask me anything. She got us to Spain. Because of her, we came home. Because of her, I flew 12 more missions. Because of her, my crew was back together. I learned after the war her name was Françoise. I never got to thank her." By summer 1944, the Françoise Line's reputation had spread through Allied bomber squadrons. Downed airmen deliberately tried to reach Toulouse, knowing that if they could make contact with Françoise's network, their odds of reaching home jumped from less than 5% to over 60%, but the Gestapo was closing in. This story gets even more incredible. Hit that like button and let's see if we can get 10,000 likes on this video. January 1944. One of Marie-Louise's guides is arrested in Perpignan. In his notebook, an address in Toulouse, Marie-Louise's address. She evacuates 9 fugitives in 24 hours, relocating them to new safe houses. Then she goes into hiding, living in attics, basements, moving every few nights. The Gestapo searches her apartment. They miss her by 2 hours. For 6 months, Marie-Louise Dissard runs the Françoise Line while actively hunted by the Gestapo. She continues escorting airmen on trains, now heavily disguised. She moves airmen in broad daylight, past soldiers with her photograph, still using nothing but audacity and a shopping basket. One of her final missions, in July 1944 involved moving 8 American airmen from Toulouse to Perpignan, a 200-kilometer journey through the most heavily patrolled region of southern France. She succeeded. All 8 men reached Spain. 2 weeks later, Allied forces landed in southern France. The German occupation was ending. Marie-Louise Dissard had survived. Against all odds, the crazy old lady with the shopping basket had won. August 1944. Toulouse is liberated. Marie-Louise Dissard emerges from hiding to find the city celebrating. Resistance members are being hailed as heroes. American soldiers march through streets to cheering crowds. Everyone wants to honor the brave fighters who defied the Nazis. Marie-Louise quietly returns to her dress shop on Rue de la Paume. "I just did what needed doing," she told a reporter who tracked her down. Any decent person would have done the same. This attitude would define the rest of her life. After the war, the accolades poured in. France awarded her the Legion of Honor and the Croix de Guerre. The United Kingdom granted her the George Medal, one of the highest civilian honors. The United States presented the Medal of Freedom with gold palm. Belgium honored her as well. At one ceremony, an American general tried to present her with the Medal of Freedom in front of assembled press. Marie-Louise accepted the medal, then quietly said, "This honor belongs to the 123 helpers I recommended for recognition. They risked everything. I just coordinated." She refused most interview requests, avoided publicity. When American airmen tried to locate her after the war to thank her personally, she made herself difficult to find. "They were just doing their duty," she said. "I was doing mine." One post-war quote captures her attitude perfectly. Asked by a French journalist in 1946 whether she considered herself a hero, Marie-Louise replied, "Heroes are the young men who flew those bombers knowing most wouldn't survive 25 missions. Heroes are the farmers who hid airmen knowing the penalty was execution. Heroes are the mountain guides who cross the Pyrenees in winter storms. I just walked annoying Germans on trains. Any loud old woman could have done it." The statistics tell a different story. The Françoise Line, over 250 Allied airmen evacuated, March 1943, August 1944. Combined with her O'Leary Line work, over 700 Allied aircrew saved. Across all escape lines, Pat O'Leary, Comet Line, Françoise Line, Shelburne Line, and others, approximately 7,000 Allied personnel successfully evacuated from occupied Western Europe during WWII. These 7,000 men represented roughly $105 million in training costs, $1943, over 500,000 hours of combat experience, and incalculable strategic value to the Allied bombing campaign. Many returned to fly additional missions. Their intelligence briefings helped refine bombing tactics and reduce losses. The modern legacy of the Françoise Line extends far beyond WWII. Marie-Louise Dissard pioneered tactics still studied by intelligence services today. Using apparent vulnerabilities, age, gender, eccentricity, as operational advantages, hiding in plain sight near enemy headquarters, weaponizing enemy assumptions and stereotypes, building networks based on trust rather than formal hierarchy, operating outside conventional intelligence protocols when necessary. In Toulouse today, the Lycée Professionnel, Marie-Louise Dissard Françoise, teaches students about resistance, resilience, and resourcefulness. A street bears her name. A plaque marks her former dress shop at 40 Rue de la Paume. Marie-Louise Dissard died in July 1957 at age 75. She never married, never sought fame, never wrote a memoir. Most of the 700 airmen whose lives she saved never knew her real name, only her code name, Françoise. The last word belongs to Harry Neve, the MI9 officer who approved her funding. In his post-war memoir, he wrote, "History will remember the generals, the pilots, the soldiers. But the war was won by people like Marie-Louise Dissard. Ordinary people who did extraordinary things because someone had to. She had no training, no weapons, no support, just a shopping basket, a cigarette holder, and the absolute conviction that leaving those men to rot in Nazi prisons was unacceptable. The Gestapo thought she was a harmless, eccentric old woman. She was, in fact, one of the most effective resistance operators of the entire war. May we all have her courage when duty calls. The moral lesson is simple but profound. The most dangerous opponent isn't always the one who looks dangerous. Sometimes it's the 61-year-old seamstress with a shopping basket, the one everyone underestimated, because the Nazis never saw her coming. Marie-Louise Dissard, Françoise, November 6, 1881. July 1957, 700 plus, Allied airmen saved, never captured, never broken.